Good morning. We're going to start. Welcome to the second day of the annual gathering of the Krishnamurti Foundation of America. And in order to set the mood, the state, we ask Karolina to play some music for us, and she selected two pieces by Bach. So. Yeah. There's a few things that I would like to say before we continue to the second part of the program. First about the spirit or the kind of inquiry or the kind of exploration that we're doing here, or what we're trying to foster, let me put it that way. And there are no rules and rights and wrongs, but sometimes there's some confusion about people talking about Krishnamurti. As Krishnamurti has said, there should be no interpretation. And that's often a very misunderstood aspect. In many places in his work, he would say, tear it to pieces, tear his work to pieces. Make sure, look at it from different angles. Don't assume it to be true. Make sure you revisit it and find the truth of it, if it's there for yourself. And I feel in that spirit we should really, hopefully, we can be here today to look at it, at his works, of course, but also at our own lives. And yesterday for a big part in the morning, we looked at war, and we more or less looked at, okay, war is happening, but it's somehow related to our lives now, which is very difficult to imagine. What are the seeds or the patterns that are in our daily life, inside ourselves, that somehow inevitably could lead to war, although it doesn't appear at all that it could happen here. And that is, I think, the real big challenge, to face ourselves, to look at who we are, also in our deeper layers. And Mark Habib yesterday at his talk, of course, did the anatomy on war, on the different angles, and why war in history and also currently has happened. So now I switch back again to a little bit a different angle, which will hopefully get a little bit closer to that answer, I hope. At least in the spirit of exploration and contributing to the exploration and putting questions to all of us, right? It's not that I'm telling you that I know what it is. I am working at this, and I hope that we can bring it out. So yesterday also the aspect came up. So what is the world needing? What if you had to summarize or something? What at this point of time does the world need? And Mark Habib went to the pyramid of Maslow, so there are various needs, of course, which we can say physical security, safety. We can say food, shelter, of course, you can say that's there. And also you can say meaning. And I was reflecting upon that, and I said, yes, okay. I mean that's like undoubtedly so, right? That besides the physical, the food, we also need meaning in life. But I thought on a more practical level for humanity. What is it that, from the perspective also of the Krishnamurti Foundation, what is it that we really can contribute? And I thought, well, that's actually for the world, is point us towards a different direction on what the core issues are of why humanity is suffering. And I feel that's what we're trying to do maybe with Krishnamurti's work, is we're trying to have pointers and distribute these pointers, disseminate the pointers of Krishnamurti, pointing to certain aspects of human existence that might lead to suffering, which war is an example for, but of course psychological suffering, any form of suffering is suffering. And so I would like to look at it from the big angle. So what I think the world is doing now, and what the KFA is actively doing, is sending pointers and road marks or road signs everywhere. Well, at least consider this, Now, okay, so now what are these pointers pointing at? That's then the second thing. So what is the... And So, what does Krishnamurti suggest on how the human crisis or the suffering, human suffering, which includes war, which includes individual suffering, how can that come to an end? And of course, in the various talks yesterday, and for those of you who have read Krishnamurti, he has said at different locations. You will know that he said at different locations that there's a crisis in consciousness. Now, and of course, now I can say it, right? There's a crisis in consciousness, but what does that really mean, right? I mean, it's like it's a word, and you can say, well, yeah, probably, but how do you get a felt sense of the meaning of that word, that there's a crisis in consciousness, and which is obviously not that very easy, because that's why we refer to these terms, crisis in consciousness. What is consciousness anyway? You know, consciousness is, and then if you have to relate that then to, okay, so if there would not be a crisis in consciousness, this war would not happen. How would that affect Putin, for example? What would be, if you would have to, okay, suppose there would, so he would solve his crisis in consciousness. What would then have happened differently? Would he have different information in his head? Yeah, is that one of the aspects of the crisis in consciousness, that we don't have enough sufficient or complete information on things? Or is it that there's something in the processing of information and the method on how he made decisions at a certain point? Is that what led to the war? So those are two considerations that if I put them out there, they look far-fetched, but I think all of us in our conflicts in our day-to-day life more or less function that way. We look in, is the information complete, or have we made an error in our judgment, right? I mean, I was angry with this person, but I shouldn't have been really, because if I look the other evidence, or, you know. So now, if you look at, Mark Habib also brought it out yesterday, and others also have discussed that, it seems to be that is not the crisis in consciousness that Krishnamurti is talking about. He's not saying we don't have enough information, and he also is not saying there's an error in processing information, in your logic judgment, right? In your logic process. He's somehow saying, Krishnamurti is somehow saying that there's a backdrop that all this information and decision making is falling in, that somehow is biased. It's directed. It has already pathways that it falls into and trajectories it goes on that leads you to outcomes that inevitably lead to conflict. Now, so these pathways, conditioning, you can call them bias, and then you can say, okay, that sounds reasonable. You know, we're coming out of thousands of years of evolution. We were a lizard originally. You know, we still have part of our lizard brain functioning, and then we evolved to monkeys, and now we've evolved to whatever, Homo sapiens, and you can say, okay, so we have inherited all that behavior, and you know, I mean, and if you look at sociology, they will tell you also, you know, I mean, we're acting as a group of monkeys in many aspects of our lives, right? Not only, but for a big part, the social hierarchies we're creating, the way we look for alpha males or females, and how we look for approval and grooming each other. So our behavior is, if you look at that, what I just said, the bias, the pattern, the trajectories that we're on, all our information is falling in that space. But the issue is we don't know it, right? I make a conclusion on something, I get a feeling about something, I can make a decision based upon that, and I don't know how it comes. Suddenly it happens, right? And I give a narrative or an explanation on it. Now, so we're saying what does the world need is pointers. We're saying, secondly, the problem seems to be human consciousness, but we don't really know exactly what that means, but it seems to be in that trajectory. Now, what is Krishnamurti suggesting as how that problem can be solved, which is also an important one, right? Because, I mean, you can point out the issues, but then how does he suggest that we solve this? And so there you can take many angles. And so first, it's maybe good to look at how are we normally, or traditionally, or habitually, how are we in society, because I think it's everywhere. How do we try to solve these kind of issues? Now, one thing is, we try to, if somebody points something out to me, we try to somehow reprogram ourselves, right? I mean, you point out to me that I have some kind of bias towards someone, and then I try to remember that bias and try to correct that. So I remember and then change my behavior accordingly. Now, okay, that is one way of looking, and as we can see, it has a certain use. And so I don't think that Krishnamurti necessarily says that there's an issue with that. There's not a problem with solving some particular issues, some particular biases, some particular patterns with different patterns. But there's one little discussion he had, or conversation he had, where he says, okay, so as an example of how issues are resolved in consciousness, suppose you're addicted to smoking. That's one thing. And many of us are or have been, right? I mean, it's less popular now, but in our youth we maybe smoked, and then it becomes an issue because it's not healthy, etc. So you smoke, and then you try to get rid of smoking, so you discipline yourself, so you get out of smoking. So Krishnamurti said jokingly, he said, oh, not jokingly, but it sounds jokingly. So you start with the habit of smoking, and then you battle the habit of smoking with a second habit to not smoke. So then you end up with two habits, right? So okay, so that might be a trajectory which is well accepted and something that we can do, but it might not be. First of all, it might just create additional patterns and additional habits that might lead to its own problems. And also, how do you tackle all the various habits you have, all the various habits that you have inherited in your psyche, as humanity, right? Not also your particular habits, because your particular childhood, but most of all, the whole patterns that we have inherited. So, of course, Krishnamurti says, so somehow to get into a state of observation, can you observe yourself and analyze yourself? So that seems to be the direction he's going, and he emphasizes, and that's maybe two things, because if you have to say, what is unique about Krishnamurti's work? What of all? Now, grant you, various people challenge that there's maybe not so much unique, because if you look at the whole history of religion, many things have been said, but there are two things that, at least from my point of view, have stood out. And in speaking with the various scholars worldwide, there are two aspects which he really, which in my view are really unique. And that the one thing, of course, is that what we said in 1929, that truth is a pathless land. And as obvious as it sounds, it has very deep meaning and deep consequences. It means somehow no authority, that in order to liberate oneself from the burden of conditioning, there is no system, there is no process, there's no path, there's no way you can set up something that will make this happen. You can set your setup to get rid of smoking for particular things, but you cannot adopt a path or a system to get rid of that. So that's one very unique thing. And there's a second unique thing, which is the weirdest thing of all. I mean, he says it everywhere, but when you start thinking about it, you say, wow, what is that? How is that possible? What does that mean? It's so alien to our psyche that he says, no time. He says, a change should happen instantly. A change is not gradual. As soon that acceptance, I mean, in many places he would say, the acceptance of time is the greatest sin that has happened to humanity. So there's something, so in that he's somehow suggesting that there's an opportunity or a possibility within our psyche to somehow make an instant change at this moment. So during these last day of the gathering, you have about 7 hours left for this instant change. So we check. We're going to check you all at the exit. We have designed a little meter to read your aura. So today, so this was just my intro in summary. The next, after me, Karen is going to introduce the next program, which is Siddharth Menon on poetry. And then we have our lunch, of course. And then after lunch, there will be 2 programs. One will be, we call about young people, keeping the mind young. So for anybody who feels they're aging, come to that program, which is by spearheaded by Leah and some others. And the last program at the end of the day is what we call the State of the KFA. I mean, it's not so pompous as it sounds, but it's really that we're trying to tell you the kind of thinking that we're doing within the organization in order to disseminate Krishnamurti's teachings and creating the spirit of inquiry in the center and try to encourage that in different parts of the world. So that's what's coming up. No, I don't take questions because we're going for the next one, huh?
Isn't there going to be another piano?
Oh, yes. Oh, thank you. That's really, thank you. Oh, I'm so happy that I didn't. No, I'm not going to answer. No, yes. No, I mean, it's actually a treat. I mean, I'm especially very, well, okay, I actually can say something. So Karolina actually came to the Krishnamurti Center maybe 3 or 4 years ago and saw that we had a baby grand there. And she said, "Oh, what a beautiful piano you have there." So she was the first one who started playing that. And that's how we established a relationship with her, where she played also in the last meeting. And so I feel that has been such a wonderful and enormous, beautiful addition. But there's an additional treat. Her sister Maria is going to join her on the violin. So after Siddharth's talk on Krishnamurti and poetry, we will have Maria and Karolina playing. I think it's Bach also. No, it's Afro part. Yeah?
There is a couple of different.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I'll introduce it.
Good. She will do that. So thank you. I think I got the signals from the crew that I have to vacate. So thank you.